It's September 2nd, 1991. We're up here at the river. Grandma and Grandpa, Jamie and Carol. Okay, Grandpa, you have the floor.
I have the floor. Well,
You
thank
want to
you.
talk about your father?
No, I won't talk about him.
What
I
was
have no pleasant
nothing pleasant?
memories. They were all pretty bad. I was the last person to see him off on the train. I walked him to the depot and he took the train.
What was his name?
Brown,
What was his first name?
Sam,
Sam Brown.
J.
That's right.
Sam Brown.
And how old were you when he left?
Oh, I was in ninth grade, about 12.
So you grew up with him then.
Well, when he was home,
How often was that?
but he worked. His work was so bad, he'd go to different towns and stay for months and months. And Ma'd have to take care of us kids, and he's supposed to send money, but you know how it is. He would never have enough to go around. So I guess up until 1912, around in there, while he was with us. But before that, I was too young. We left Liberty in 1910, and he stayed there to work on a paper. So I didn't have any contact with my father then for a long time. But after he left and went back to his brother in Missouri, Hannibal, Missouri, Ma got acquainted with Joe Brown.
Can I ask you a question at this point? Did you ever see him again, your real father, after that?
Not after that. Never heard about him.
When did he die? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Uh,
So no one in the family ever heard from him again?
no,
Well, then did your mother file for divorce?
no.
So as far as you know, she never was divorced from him.
Huh?
So she never was really legally divorced from him then?
Not that I know of. I don't know. She did a lot of things that she didn't figure anybody's business.
Well, I think that's how it was in those days, though.
Just like she said to uh, Greta and I went on Wren Avenue. She came back from 2 years trip. She went back to Oklahoma to see the kinfolk. And so things weren't going to suit her there, and she'd been home about a couple of months or so. And she says, "I'm going to Fort Bragg and get married." So we told her, "Good luck. Adios." So she took the bus and went to Fort Bragg. And 2 weeks later, well, we got a letter and she was married.
When were you you two were married in 48? 48?
This is in the 50s.
And then when did you move to Wren Avenue? 48,
Well, I
right.
was living when he came home from war.
Oh, you were already living
I
on
was
Wren
living
Avenue?
at Knox. I don't know. I was living in Knox,
Where's that? In Concord?
Port Chicago.
Oh, we're getting ahead of our story here. Okay.
Well, the middle of Joe Brown's story. Well, I tell you, Ma and Ruby went to Los Angeles and left me in New Mexico. And after the summer was over, well, I took the money I made and went to Los Angeles to live with them. And when I got there, why, she had this friend Joe Brown. She told me about him. He was nobody knew much about him. He's supposed to be a rum runner in Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a dry state, you know, and you couldn't have any liquor. They used to bootleg it.
So we're up to like in the 20s now then, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah. Oklahoma was local option, they call it.
Uh-huh.
You had liquor or not, people voted on it. They did on account of the Indians.
Uh-huh.
They were not allowed to have any liquor.
Oh.
But anyhow, he was must have had a prison sentence. He had a tattoo on his arm he cut off with a razor. He had a horrible scar on his left arm on the inside.
Gee.
And he didn't do too much talking about his life, but after I met him, why, he and I got to be pals, and his gang that he ran with, they hung out down in Skid Row, and I used to go down there at the pool hall where they were, and boy, they'd treat me like a king. And we'd watch the pool games, and they'd take a taxi and take me up to the Pantages with them to see the boat bill.
And you were a
we'd go out and
teenager?
eat. And well, Joe would be with Ma, but other guys.
Oh.
So I really liked that, but I don't know how good it was for me.
How old were you then?
I was 15.
Oh. Uh-huh.
So I thought that first time I ever got to, call up a taxi and say, take us up to Pantages. That was all new, and I really ate it up. But anyhow.
And what town? This was in Fort Bragg?
Los Angeles.
Oh, this was down in How did you get from Fort Bragg to Los Angeles?
We haven't got to Fort Bragg yet. This is 1922, when I was 15.
But where'd your mom meet
Los
Joe?
Angeles.
Oh, she met him down in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's what I say. She and Ruby were there, and I came and she and Joe had gotten acquainted.
Oh, now what did you go to Los Angeles for originally?
To get out of New Mexico.
Okay.
So it was that was another story. Anyhow, I went to Lincoln High School. I never been to any school or not even a full term, most of them. So I didn't have any credentials. And the teacher in the office in Los Angeles took me in, and we figured out where I should be, and that's what she put me in, and that's where I got my grades from then on. She gave me grades up to that, 11th grade, I guess it was. So I was happy about that. But, Joe and Ma, he was a carpenter at that time. He did anything. He was a carpenter, and he was a gambler, and he loved to teach the kids card tricks. Donald will tell you about the tricks that he taught him when Donald went to Fort Bragg. He was quite a guy. So we never worried too much about a livelihood because he was pretty ingenious. And I know he'd bring home his lunchbox full of scrap brass. And he'd put it in a sack, and then when things got bad, well, he'd take it down and sell it, and then we'd have money. And things like that. He was pretty good.
And the girls get along with him good too, Ruby and Barbara?
Oh, well, yeah, Barbara did. Ruby was out of the picture.
Oh, she had moved out by then.
Yeah, well, yeah, she was. That was before she met Donald Davidson. They got married in Los Angeles. Kenneth's father. So, and Barbara was a baby, and she liked him real well. So anyhow, they got.
Did Barbara ever know your real father then?
Not too much. See, Ma was in her 30s when Barbara was born. Barbara was born in 1913. New Mexico just became a state. The year before, it was a territory. It was a state in 1912, and she was born in 1913. So she was pretty little. We bought an old 1917 Model T, and it leaked. It leaked until it got the coils all wet. If you know anything about a Model T, they're under the dashboard, and they made of wood. Boxes. They swelled up, and they couldn't get it started for a month. We finally towed it and got it started, and one of Joe's friends had a still. That was during Prohibition time. And he had this still, and he wanted somebody to take care of it right away. So he brought it out to our house, and Joe put it in the attic. Great big still. About it must have been 30 gallons or better. And Ma was worried to death about that thing. So she finally made Joe promise to take it away. So one Sunday he put it in a Ford, old car, and it didn't have any top. He put it in the back seat and covered it up with a blanket. And I was in the back seat. So Ma and I and the still Barbara started to Long Beach from South Pasadena, and that was 30 miles or better. We started early in the morning, and we chugged down till we got down somewhere, Huntington Park or something, and the car quit with us in the still. So cops, they stayed and directed traffic at the corners. He got off his box and came over and helped Joe push the Ford
And had the still in the back seat.
with the still there. And there was a place across the street that needed a new timer, so they put a timer on it. We went 90 miles an hour to Long Beach, and it was late in the day. But we got rid of the still, much to Ma's glory, and we started home. And we got home way late at night. It was only 30 miles. That was 60 miles round trip, and that was all day long.
Can I stop here? Because describe what Los Angeles was like then.
Oh, it had less than 1 million people, 700,000, and it wasn't too bad, the traffic. I lived at 3rd and Broadway in a hotel, and Roman's Rialto was 3rd Street Theater was right across the street, and I went there all the time. And Booze Brothers had cafeterias, and you could eat breakfast and all dinners pretty cheap. And they didn't have any signals on the streets at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were still driving horse and wagons for freight down on the industrial part of town. But it changed pretty rapidly. That was in the 20s,
Mm-hmm.
22. In 10 years, well, all that had changed. They had the signals with the little paddles on them that dropped down, that stopped and go, and some of them were up high in the middle of the street and you couldn't see them, and you'd run over them. I mean, not run over them, but you'd miss them. But and you could go to the streetcars, the red cars. They ran everywhere. You could go to Long Beach in 45 minutes for 35, 40 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And they had 6-car trains, and they'd travel like mad. They'd do 60 miles an hour down San Pedro Street. And Long Beach was one of the favorite places. Long Beach and Venice. But I liked Long Beach. And Joe, what he'd do, he'd dress up in his Sunday suit, put his tooth in. He had a gold tooth on a cap, and he'd stick that on. And another story about that gold tooth. He put it on the day I got married, and he put it on too tight, and it was aching the dickens out of him. He couldn't get rid of it, so finally he had to run home and get a pair of pliers and pull the tooth off. That's just here and there. That's the kind of a guy he was. So, and the parks. There were a lot of parks in town. Echo Park, and there was one out north Wilshire Boulevard going out of town in the big park. They rented boats, and you could go out and get a boat for 25 cents a boat for hours. And it was a lot of fun.
How long did you live in Los Angeles?
I left there in 32, I think.
And where did you go?
No, 37, I guess. And I never went back. A few times, but not to live. You couldn't cross Wilshire Boulevard. You'd come up to Wilshire on one of the streets, and you'd have to turn right turn only, And there you'd be fighting up Wilshire Boulevard in the right-hand lane, trying to get across the whole traffic. And so you turn off at that block and run look for one that took you to a signal.
Now, tell about your work there.
Huh?
Tell about where you worked.
Oh, I worked out by the Coliseum.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't very old. And they had the Olympic Games out there too, but it was about 4 or 5 blocks.
Uh-huh.
I worked on Vermont and University, where they joined. and it was an old blacksmith shop, and they didn't put a floor in it. They just laid boards down on the dirt.
Uh-huh.
And on a hot day like this, the fumes from the old blacksmith shop would start coming up, and it smelled like a stable, you know.
Uh-huh.
It was a hard place to work, and you couldn't sweep the floor. You had to pick them up by all the scrap iron by hand because the boards were uneven.
Uh-huh.
But the guy that owned it liked me, and he was always giving me a nickel an hour raise. I finally got 40 cents an hour. Pretty good.
Mhm.
And 1928, no, early 90s it was. 19, in the early 20s, I was getting $28 a week, and that was a month's rent.
Uh-huh.
So I was wealthy enough to get married, much to my sorrow and dismay. But anyhow, Los Angeles just started to grow, and it just when people came in there day and night, it just streamed in. And then the Depression came. That's another long story. Poor Depression. I guess Gertha's got a lot of stories
Yeah,
to tell.
Depression songs. Now, I've heard about the cabin that Joe Brown built up in Fort Bragg.
Oh,
How
yeah.
did you get from Southern California to Fort Bragg? Or when did that
Know
happen?
why they went there.
Well, he traded his house. He built when he worked on the Biltmore, son, I started to tell you.
Uh-huh.
He had this old Ford that he went to work in, and the farm lumber and all the 2x4s, old stuff like that. They build the forms for cement, and then they strip them and they throw them in the junk pile. And Joe brought home enough stuff in that Ford to build a house.
Oh.
And he built a house on a hill,
Uh-huh.
and it was 3 bedrooms, big living room, and it was built on a hill. It was kitchen was downstairs, and it was
What was the area named?
out by
Eagle.
San Fernando Road. Eagle Rock Boulevard runs into San
Uh-huh.
Fernando Road,
Uh-huh.
and right there, you could go to Eagle Rock and Pasadena or Glendale. It was kind of a junction.
Uh-huh.
So he built this house, and then the Depression came, and he was having trouble. So he traded the house for some land in Oregon, some undeveloped land.
Uh-huh.
And he went up there, and he couldn't find it. They lost their home, and the guy beat him out of it, I guess. So they traveled around, and Joe worked. He went to the ranch in Carmel. He was driving for George Gordon Moore, the millionaire. He had been a millionaire. And Ma was doing the kitchen and housework. And they weren't getting any money, but they had a good place to live. So I went up there too. But they lived there and worked to build a sawmill. We cut wood. We did everything. But then after that, it wasn't any work. So he went to Oakland with the same guy, and that didn't work out. So finally, he got a job. He moved over to Brisbane, and he got a job in South San Francisco in a packing plant, slaughterhouse. So that was the first real solid job he'd had for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had an accident on Labor Day, and I stayed home with the folks for a year. And then after I got to functioning again, Joe got me a job down at the packing plant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a courtesy job. Joe was they well liked and good man. They couldn't spare him. So they gave me this job. All I had to do was see that the trucks had enough oil in the engine and water in the radiator, and the tires were all up.
Mm-hmm.
And I got $30 a week maybe. So that was all right. And then I built this job. I started saying I was a mechanic, and I bought tools, and they bought me anything I wanted, air compressors, and I've changed engines finally, and I was a real mechanic.
Mhm.
So Joe, he thought he deserved more than they got, and he quit.
Mhm.
And then he went to, he worked for the railroad a little while, and then he quit that, and then he went to Fort Bragg and bought Casper, really, and bought a couple acres of land up there with a house on it, and moved up there. That's during the war. And,
You gotta tell him why he moved. It was you.
huh?
You caused it.
Oh yeah, I guess Ma thought that I would come back and be content to.
Yeah, but what did you say after the Battle of the Bulge? You said, I want to go in the woods and I want to get where there's nobody, and
Yeah, but
She
I
took
didn't
you
know you.
literally.
I hadn't met you yet. See,
Okay, so this was you were in World War II, so this was
World War
after
II.
you were, you know.
Yeah, well,
Older.
they lived in San Francisco, and I lived there, and that's where I was inducted to San Francisco.
Mhm.
And I went to San Diego, spent 18 months, and then I went to the infantry in Indianapolis,
Mhm.
pretty close, Fort, yep, quite close to that. So then I was in Europe, coming home, and they were in Fort Bragg.
Now
That's another story how Gertha and I got together. And
yeah, but you skipped over that serious accident you had. And that was a whole period out of your life in Brisbane.
is that when you had the car accident?
And
no,
the girl was killed.
oh, that was
He was in
long time. That was
He
in
was in a
30.
cast,
That was in the
body
30s.
cast. We're talking about Brisbane.
Oh, Brisbane.
You just said you. I don't know what you
Oh, I
said.
generally try to skip that part.
It was funny them putting you out on the balcony. That's a funny story.
I had a cast on. They call it a body cast, but it went up to my neck, under my arms, really, the top, and it went down, and one knee was open, like it was out, and the other went clear down to my ankle. Spike, we call it, the cast.
Uh-huh.
And they took me to the hospital. That happened in Carpinteria, and I took me to the hospital in Santa Barbara. And the doctor, I didn't have any money. The guys I worked with sent me $80. And the doctor there said, well, you're going to be in that cast a long time. Said, you could go home. And he talked to Ma on the phone, and they decided they'd come down. They came saw me to see me, and then they arranged to take me on the train. So they took me down to the Golden State Limited train and put me in an upper berth. They didn't make the lower one down. They put me in this upper, and they were afraid I'd have to go to the toilet. Everybody was. It was an all-night trip to San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
And we got to Brisbane, and they took me up to where I was going to stay. It was a 3-story building, and it had a, what do you call that? Kind of a tower room. And it had one around, and it had windows all the way around it, you know. And I was on the 3rd floor, and I could overlook the bay and Candlestick Park and the dump and everything. It was pretty nice. So they got me up the steps. They finally had to carry me on the back to get me up there. So I liked that room because they brought 2 dressers in, and they fixed the mirrors so I could look in the mirror and I could see down on the sidewalk right below the building.
Oh.
And the WPA was going then, and I saw a lot of funny things. Guys leaning on shovels. It was no joke. So I was there for 3 months, And he heard Joe Brown again. I was complaining one night about this cast was bothering me. It was itching, and my skin was all coming off, and being on so long. So he went down in his toolbox and got a a chisel and a hammer, and he cut that cast off of it. And then I got out of bed happy as a lark, and I stood up for about 2 minutes, and I went back to bed, and I stayed for 3 days. I was content. I was